A billionaire dropped $50,000 cash in front of a homeless single dad to test him, but the moment his shaking hands touched the money, something happened that would soon break her heart completely. She stood only a few feet away, hidden behind the tinted window of her black SUV, watching him the way she watched every person she tested, cold, controlled, convinced she already knew what he would do. But this man, this exhausted father with torn shoes, hollow eyes, and a little boy sleeping in his arms, he didn't move the way greedy people moved. He didn't look at the cash like a miracle. He looked at it like a burden. His name was Daniel Cole, a once promising engineer who had lost everything in a single year. His job, his apartment, his wife, and now carried the weight of keeping his son alive one day at a time. Her name was Ariella Vaughn, one of the youngest billionaires in the country, a woman known for testing strangers with money to measure humanity. But as Daniel bent slowly toward the cash, not with hunger but with hesitation, something inside Ariella shifted. Why wasn't he rushing? Why wasn't he grabbing? Why was a man who clearly needed help acting like touching money would hurt him? Daniel glanced at his sleeping son, then at the cash, then at the sky, like he was asking life itself whether he was allowed to take this chance. And Ariella felt a sting she had never felt during any test before. Shame. But she refused to look away. She had to know. Would a homeless father take all 50,000? Would he run? Would he fail like everyone else? Or was she standing before the one man whose choices would expose something about herself she wasn't ready to face? And if this single dad was so poor, so desperate, so cornered by life, why did it look like touching the money might break him too? What was he about to do with the $50,000? And why would his decision end up breaking her billionaire heart? The wind carried the early winter chill across the city as Daniel Cole shifted his son higher against his shoulder. Little Evan slept with the deep, heavy exhaustion of a child who hadn't had a warm bed in too long. Each breath was small, uneven, softly wheezing, a reminder of the cold that kept tightening its grip on his lungs. Daniel rubbed his son's back gently and whispered, "Just one more hour, buddy. We'll find a place tonight. I promise." Promises. They used to mean something when he could keep them. Before life started stripping things away faster than he could hold them. Before losing his job at the engineering firm during budget cuts. Before the savings drained. Before his wife, overwhelmed by the pressure, packed her bags and left. Before the eviction notice. Before the shelters filled up and the wait lists grew longer. Before every day became a negotiation with survival. When the black SUV rolled to a stop beside him on the sidewalk, Daniel took a step back instinctively. Expensive cars meant one of two things: someone asking him to move away, or someone pretending not to see him at all. But the window didn't roll down. The engine didn't cut off. It simply idled. Then the passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, tall, poised, wrapped in a long cream coat that probably cost more than Daniel had made in the last year. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at Evan. She simply held a thick envelope in her hand, then let it fall to the ground at Daniel's feet with a soft thud. Daniel stared. It wasn't an envelope. It was a brick of cash, bound tight with a rubber strap. "Ma'am," he began, but she was already walking back to the SUV. No explanation. No expression. No humanity. It was like she was dropping a package, not $50,000. Daniel blinked hard. His hands trembled as he crouched, careful not to jostle Evan. He touched the edge of the money, cold, crisp, far too real. Fear shot through him like electricity. People didn't just drop cash like this. Not unless it came with consequences. From inside the SUV, Ariella watched everything. Cameras were hidden inside the side mirrors, recording angles no one would suspect. She studied the man's reaction with the intensity of a scientist watching a fragile experiment. He didn't grab it. He didn't hide it. He didn't smile. He looked terrified. That wasn't the usual response. Daniel slowly lifted the brick of money and held it like something that could explode. His throat tightened as he whispered, "Why? Why give this to me?" Evan stirred from the movement, his tiny hand curling into his father's jacket. Daniel froze, steadying him. Ariella's eyes softened for a second, something she would deny later. Her tests were simple: show money to someone who appeared desperate and observe their choices. Greed always revealed itself. She'd seen people fight, lie, betray strangers within seconds. It confirmed what she believed: most people weren't good. Most people didn't deserve help. But this man, he was slowing down her conclusion. Daniel swallowed hard and looked around the street. "This can't be real," he murmured. "Someone's watching. Someone wants something." He wasn't wrong. Ariella leaned closer to the glass as he stood up. "Come on," she whispered to herself. What will you do? Run? Hide? Spend? Prove me right. Daniel's heartbeat thundered as he walked toward the small bench near the bus stop. He laid the money beside him and held his son tighter. The cold bit into his skin, but he didn't move. All he could think was, if I take this money, am I stealing? If I leave it, am I stupid? If it's a trap, Evan pays the price. He took a slow breath and then, shockingly, even to himself, he pushed the entire brick of cash farther away on the bench, like he needed distance between the temptation and his conscience. From inside the SUV, Ariella sat forward sharply. Why push it away? Why not touch it again? Why choose hesitation over hunger? Daniel closed his eyes. God, what am I supposed to do? He whispered. Ariella could almost hear the words even through the glass. But then something happened neither of them expected. A police cruiser turned the corner. The officer inside spotted Daniel. And the SUV's cameras caught it all as the cruiser slowed. Daniel stiffened. Ariella's heartbeat kicked up. What he did next would change everything. The police cruiser rolled to a slow stop beside the bench, its tires crackling over bits of gravel. Daniel's heart plunged into his stomach. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because homeless men with bricks of cash never looked innocent. Not to the world, not to the law, and especially not to officers who already assumed the worst. Evan stirred against his chest, his little fingers tightening in fear as the cruiser door opened. Sir, the officer called, stepping out with one hand resting near his holster. Not touching it, not drawing, but close enough to remind Daniel of how fragile the moment was. Everything okay over here? Daniel forced himself to breathe. He lifted his free hand slowly, keeping his movements soft so he wouldn't wake Evan. Yes, officer, he said quietly. Everything's fine. The officer's eyes dropped to the bench, to the thick brick of cash, to the loose strap hanging off it like a flag announcing trouble. Where'd you get that? The question sliced through the cold air. From inside the SUV, Ariella leaned forward, tension tightening her jaw. She wasn't supposed to interfere. She never interfered. The rules of her tests were simple. Observe, don't intervene. But watching Daniel freeze under the weight of suspicion sparked something unfamiliar, an uncomfortable twist that felt too close to guilt. Daniel's voice cracked. Someone dropped it. The officer raised a brow. Someone just left $50,000 in front of you? Daniel swallowed. His throat felt raw. Yes, sir. I didn't touch it. Well, I picked it up, but I set it right back down. I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to take care of my boy. The officer's face softened for half a second as he glanced at the sleeping child. But protocol kicked in quickly. Sir, I need you to step away from the money. Daniel obeyed instantly, shifting sideways while still holding Evan. His legs trembled, not from guilt but from exhaustion, cold, and the fear that one misunderstanding could cost him everything. The officer inspected the money, running his thumb over the crisp bills. He muttered under his breath, "This isn't counterfeit." Then louder, "Sir, until we determine ownership, this is evidence." Daniel nodded. "Take it," he whispered. "I don't want it." Ariella flinched. He didn't want it. A homeless father didn't want $50,000. What? She felt a pressure in her chest she didn't recognize. Something tightening, uncomfortable. The officer straightened. "Where were you planning to go tonight?" Daniel hesitated. Pride and shame tangled on his tongue. "I don't know yet. The shelters are full. We were going to try the church on 8th Street. Maybe they'd let us stay in the hallway." The officer exhaled slowly. "Sir, it's below freezing tonight." Daniel nodded once. He knew. He had been trying not to think about it. The officer rubbed a hand over his jaw. "I'll radio around, see if a spot opens up somewhere. Stay here. Don't move." As the officer stepped aside to speak into his shoulder radio, Daniel lowered onto the bench, not near the money but at the far edge. He held Evan close, pulling the boy's thin coat around him. Daniel's eyes burned, not from the cold, but from the humiliation of being seen as a threat simply for existing near money he didn't even want. In the SUV, Ariella's breathing grew uneven. This wasn't supposed to happen. She gave money to expose greed, entitlement, selfishness, not to put a father in danger. She'd never run a test that intersected with police attention before. She'd never had a subject who looked genuinely afraid of failing a moral exam he didn't know he was taking. She reached for the door handle. "Ma'am?" her driver asked from the front seat. "Do you want me to intervene?" Ariella's fingers curled away. Her rules echoed in her mind. Observe. Never interfere. Outcomes reveal truth. But watching Daniel's shaking shoulders, the way he shielded his son with his entire body even while exhausted, made her wonder whether her rules were built not on wisdom, but on distance. Distance from people she judged without understanding. The officer returned. "Sir," he said, "no beds available. But I can take you both to the precinct. We have a waiting area. Swarm. It's something." Daniel nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. I appreciate that." The officer gestured toward the cruiser. Daniel stood carefully, murmuring comfort to Evan as he followed the officer. And Ariella felt something twist inside her. He wasn't taking the money. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't even questioning why someone would drop a life-changing amount of cash at his feet. He was just surviving. As Daniel passed in front of the SUV, the streetlight caught the lines of fatigue carved into his face. Not laziness. Not carelessness. Pure, strangling exhaustion. And something broke open in Ariella, an unwelcome, unexpected memory. Her father. The last time she'd seen him before the heart attack. A man who had grown up poor, who built an empire out of nothing, who taught her that testing people revealed their character. But he never tested desperate people. He helped them. Ariella exhaled shakily. "Stop the car," she said. The driver hesitated. "Ma'am," the officer. "I said stop." The SUV engine quieted. Daniel reached the cruiser's door and paused, turning one last time to stare at the brick of cash sitting abandoned on the bench. No greed flickered in his eyes. Only a tired kind of sadness, like he was mourning an opportunity he couldn't take because the cost to his dignity was too high. Ariella's throat tightened. She opened her door. For the first time since the test began, she broke her rule. "Daniel," she called softly. He froze. The officer turned. Even Evan stirred. Daniel looked up, and his eyes widened at the sight of the woman from before stepping toward him, coat trailing behind her, face suddenly human, not distant. He whispered, stunned, You know my name?" Ariella swallowed. "Yes," she said. "And I need to tell you the truth. About all of this." Daniel stared at her through the fogging streetlight, unsure whether he should fear her, trust her, or walk away entirely. But the truth she was about to reveal was only the beginning of what would break her heart. Daniel stood rooted to the pavement, the cold air stinging his face as he tried to understand how this elegantly dressed stranger, this woman who had dropped more money at his feet than he'd seen in the last 2 years, knew his name. The officer looked between them, unsure whether to step in or step back. Ariella felt her pulse hammering in her throat. She had rehearsed truth-telling 1,000 times in her life, but only in business rooms, board meetings, courtroom negotiations. Not here. Not on a freezing sidewalk, not in front of a man who looked like life had already tested him far more than she ever could. "I know your name," she said softly, "because I researched you before today." The officer's brows lifted. Daniel blinked. "You what?" Ariella inhaled, steadying herself. "Daniel Cole. 34. Former mechanical engineer. Worked at Harrington Robotics for 6 years. Performance reviews, exceptional. Laid off after departmental restructuring." She paused. Her voice softened. "You weren't supposed to lose everything after that." Daniel felt heat rise behind his eyes, not anger but shame. Every fact she listed felt like a bruise being pressed. "Why?" he asked, voice trembling. "Why research me? Why stalk me?" Ariella flinched. "Not stalk. I screen people. I look for individuals whose circumstances make their moral decisions visible. I test them. That's what this was, a test. The money, the envelope, everything." Daniel stared at her, stunned. The officer stepped back, realizing this was no ordinary encounter. "You tested me?" Daniel whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of the words. "You threw $50,000 at my feet to see what I'd do with it?" Ariella swallowed. "Yes." Daniel let out a shaking laugh, bitter, exhausted, broken at the edges. "You don't even know what it's like out here," he said. "You don't know what it feels like to hold your child and wonder if he'll make it through the night. And you test me? What? To entertain yourself? To feel powerful?" Her chest tightened. No, it's not like that." "It looks exactly like that." Evan shifted in his sleep, pressing his cheek against Daniel's shoulder. Daniel instinctively rocked him, even as anger simmered beneath his exhaustion. Ariella took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel, every person I've tested so far has failed. Some stole. Some fought. Some lied. Some took everything and ran. I started believing my father was right, that humanity only reveals its greed when money is involved." Daniel looked at her with hollow eyes. "And you wanted to see if I'd failed too?" "Yes," she whispered. "But you didn't." Daniel's expression didn't soften. You don't know what I would have done. You didn't even give me time. But I saw how you looked at the money, she said quietly. Like it frightened you. Like it wasn't a blessing but a warning. Her voice wavered slightly. Daniel, why did you push it away? The truth sat heavy on his tongue. He could lie. He could pretend he wasn't tempted. He could pretend he wasn't terrified. But something in Ariella's eyes, confused, vulnerable, strangely human, made the truth slip out. Because every time life gives me something, Daniel whispered, it takes something bigger. I've lost too much already. I didn't want to lose him too. He nodded toward Evan. Money always comes with a cost. Ariella's breath left her in a quiet gasp. The officer looked down, suddenly uncomfortable, pretending to check his radio. Daniel continued, voice low. When I had a job, when I had a home, money meant opportunity. Now it means risk. Danger. Someone hurting me. Someone taking Evan. Someone blaming me for something I didn't do. I couldn't touch that money because I didn't know what trap came with it. Trap. The word hit Ariella harder than she expected. Because he wasn't wrong, not entirely. I'm sorry, she murmured. It was a simple sentence, but she had spoken it so rarely that it felt foreign on her tongue. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I thought only about the results. Daniel swallowed. The apology eased nothing, but he appreciated the effort. The officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, if this was intentional, I need clarification. Is this money legally his? Ariella turned toward the officer. The money is clean. It belongs to me. And yes, he can keep it. She hesitated. If he wants it. Daniel stiffened. His mind spun. $50,000. $50,000. Enough to get a small apartment. Warm clothes. Medicine for Evan. Food. A chance. But he also remembered the bench, the panic, the cruiser slowing down. This money had nearly gotten him arrested. I don't know if I can take it, he whispered. Ariella's gaze softened. Then let me explain why I did this. Daniel didn't respond, but his eyes lifted just enough to show he was listening. When I was 17, Ariella said, her voice unsteady, my father collapsed in front of me. Heart failure. He survived, but only after surgery. When he woke up, he told me the world tested him every day, and he learned to test it back. He believed character revealed itself under pressure, especially financial pressure. I inherited his company, his wealth, and his philosophy. She exhaled slowly. But tonight, watching you with your son, it reminded me of something I forgot. My father didn't test desperate people. He helped them. Daniel's jaw tightened. So I'm a reminder? No, Ariella whispered. You're the first person who made me question whether my test says more about others, or about me. Silence stretched between them. Then Evan's small voice broke through it. Daddy. I'm cold. Daniel's heart clenched. He kissed Evan's forehead. I know, buddy. We're going somewhere warm. Ariella stepped forward. Please, let me help. Not as a test. Not as an experiment. Just help. Daniel hesitated. Trust was a luxury he didn't have anymore. But Evan shivered again and Daniel's resolve cracked. A father could endure the cold. A child couldn't. Daniel nodded once. What kind of help? Ariella took a breath. The kind, she said softly, that starts with giving you the $50,000 back, and ends with fixing what my test broke. Daniel stared at her. He didn't know yet that how he'd use that money, his decision, his heart, would break hers in ways she never expected. Ariella's offer hung in the frozen night air, fragile and heavy at the same time. Daniel shifted Evan gently in his arms, watching her with the guarded caution of a man who had lost the right to trust the world, but still clung to the hope that someone, someday, might mean what they said. The officer stepped back, giving them space. Perhaps he sensed the moment was bigger than protocol. Bigger than a misunderstanding over money. Bigger than a billionaire's experiment. Let me get you both somewhere warm, Ariella said quietly. Just for tonight. No questions. No tests. Daniel hesitated, but Evan's faint shiver pushed him forward. All right, he said. The word felt small, but it carried the weight of surrender and survival. Inside the SUV, the heat wrapped around them instantly. Evan's breathing steadied, his face relaxing into sleep. Daniel exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a moment, just long enough to remember what warmth felt like. Ariella watched him silently. Not the way she watched people during tests, searching for flaws or greed or weakness. She watched him now with something gentler. Something she wasn't used to feeling. The car pulled away from the curb. Daniel traced a slow circle on Evan's back. The exhaustion in his shoulders softened just a little. You don't have to do this, he murmured without looking at her. I know, Ariella said. But I want to. He nodded, unsure what to say. Minutes later, the SUV stopped in front of a small, quiet motel. Nothing luxurious. Nothing flashy. But warm. Safe. A place with 4 walls and a lock on the door. Something Daniel and Evan hadn't had in too long. The driver checked them in. Ariella walked Daniel down the hallway. The carpet was worn, but the heater hummed softly inside the room. Daniel stepped in and laid Evan gently on the bed, pulling the blanket up to his chin. For the first time in days, his son didn't curl into a tight ball for warmth. Ariella stood by the door, unsure how close she was allowed to be to this moment. Daniel turned to her. Why me? He asked quietly. You could have tested anyone. Why choose me? She swallowed. Because your file, it didn't match your situation. People who fall often show signs of it long before they hit the ground. But everything about your life said you shouldn't have ended up here. Daniel looked away. Life doesn't care what we deserve. Ariella's eyes softened. Maybe not. But people should. She stepped forward and placed the envelope, $50,000, on the table beside the bed. Daniel stared at it like it was both salvation and danger wrapped in one. This is yours, she said. No conditions. He didn't touch it. Daniel, she whispered, I'm trying to fix what I broke. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on Evan, not the money. Can you give me time to think? Of course. She hesitated, then added, I'll check on you in the morning. She turned to leave. But at the doorway, she paused and looked back at him, at the exhausted father sitting beside his sleeping son, one hand resting protectively over the boy's small chest. And something inside her ached. She left quietly. Morning sunlight spilled across the motel room. Daniel woke to Evan giggling softly at the warm air blowing from the heater. The sound alone was worth more than $50,000. Worth more than anything. A knock sounded. Daniel opened the door to find Ariella holding 2 coffees and a bag of warm pastries. No cameras. No SUV idling with tinted windows. Just her. I wanted to see how you both slept, she said gently. Well, Daniel replied. Thank you. They sat at the small round table. Daniel finally reached for the envelope. He ran a thumb across its edge, his eyes distant. Have you decided what to do with it? Ariella asked. He nodded slowly. I have. She waited, heart strangely tight. Daniel lifted his eyes. There was no greed in them. No excitement. Just a quiet resolve that made Ariella's breath catch. I'm not keeping it, he said softly. Ariella blinked. You're giving it back? No, he handed her a folded paper. I already gave it away. Her chest tightened sharply. What do you mean? Daniel took a breath. Last night, after Evan fell asleep, I walked to St. Luke's, the shelter turning people away because they had no funding. I gave them the entire $50,000. All of it. Ariella froze. $50,000. A life-changing amount. And Daniel gave it away. Not to himself. Not to Evan. Not to escape. To strangers. Her throat constricted. Why would you do that? She whispered. Daniel looked at his son, then back at her. Because we'll get through this somehow. But those people? They're freezing. They're alone. Some of them won't survive winter without help. His voice trembled. I can survive being broke, but I can't survive knowing someone died because I kept something I didn't earn. That was the moment Ariella's heart broke. Not from pity. Not from sadness. But from recognition. Recognition that she, with all her wealth, had never given with that level of sacrifice. Never helped with that level of selflessness. Never cared with that level of purity. She had tested him. Judged him. Controlled the experiment. Believed she understood human nature. And a homeless father just proved she understood nothing at all. Her eyes filled. Daniel. I'm so sorry. He shook his head gently. It's okay. No. It's not, she whispered. I tested you expecting to see greed. But all I saw was goodness I didn't know people still had. Evan tugged Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, can we say thank you to the lady? Daniel smiled softly. We already did, buddy. Ariella pressed a shaking hand to her chest. Daniel didn't know it yet, neither did she, but this act, this man, this night, would become the turning point of her life. The moment she stopped testing people and started helping them. The moment a homeless single dad showed a billionaire what humanity actually looked like. And the moment she realized that his choice, his generosity, had broken her heart not because it hurt, but because it healed something she never knew was broken.